We say the silos have fallen. So no longer is there a clear delineation between your public relations, your marketing, and your advertising. Because in a lot of ways, we've all kind of, our lines have crossed. And social media is really the reason for it. It's why you can do social media through any number of, there are lots of different firms or different places you can go depending on what your purpose is and your goal. One of the ways that we try to do that a lot with our clients, and video is one of the most compelling ways to capture this, is through their storytelling. So having the person who's experienced that third-party individual, instead of having them in front of a crowd, we're capturing them on video, and with B-roll, with other forms of video, we can put together a really compelling story that captures and potentially can reach more people than we could if it was in a one-to-one conversation.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us on another episode of Fireside Chat. Today I'm joined by Liz Sheets from Tunheim. She is the Chief Marketing Officer there. Thank you so much, Liz, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here with you today.
Totally. So tell me a little bit about your role at Tunheim, what you do, and who Tunheim is and what you guys do for your clients.
Sure. Well, I am in charge of growth for the firm. So I lead business development and marketing. I joined Tunheim about 7 years ago, and prior to that, I had worked in marketing. So it was a shift for me to get into the public relations industry, although I did go to school for public relations. So I knew what it was, but the industry has really shifted a lot, especially in the last decade. And what we do for clients, we are a communications consulting firm, and we help our clients be understood by stakeholders who are critical to their success. And that's a really important distinction for us, because there's a lot of ways to drive awareness and get attention, but it's really hard for an organization to be understood. So that's really how we focus. And so we do public relations, public affairs, digital marketing, and consulting.
Gotcha, cool. And so you talked about how PR has changed a lot over the years. So first, define what PR is, just because I'm sure there's lots of different definitions of what PR does and the purpose behind it. So how do you guys define PR? And then talk to me a little bit about the evolution that you've seen since your time.
Good question. So public relations has always been about communicating with stakeholders, whether they're internal, external, community partners. It's about communicating and communicating well on behalf of an organization. And how it's shifted, I would say, in the last decade, there are a few kind of big things, but also a lot of small things that have happened that have forced a shift. One of the biggest ones is the advent of social media. The way that we communicate with each other in the last decade has changed exponentially. And as a result, business models are being forced to change, including in traditional media, whether it's broadcast journalism, in newspapers, etc. The advent of blogs and more quick forms of communicating, that has forced a change.
Sure.
And the third one being that with that quickness of ability to communicate, how fast a company can find itself in a reputational crisis because something that was a situation quickly becomes a crisis is another way that our industry has changed. So corporate communicators or people who are communicating on behalf of an organization, their role is now both brand protector but also brand builder.
Sure.
And that really is how our industry has shifted and our business has shifted as well.
Gotcha. And have you seen video evolve in its role in the PR space and communications, and if so, how?
A lot. We still use some of the same ways of communicating with video that we have traditionally, such as we've always used B-roll, which is a form of video, you can probably explain it better than me, but without any voiceover, and we offer it to news media as something that they can put as part of a package. And we've always captured record of whether it's events or press conferences or things that are important moments so that we can package them and share them. I think what's changed a lot, well, and stepping back into the purpose of it, we've always had, as public relations professionals, we've always had to think about the story that we're trying to tell, but think about how we can package it in a way that a third party can be the person speaking on our behalf, whether it's a reporter, a community leader, someone on behalf of an organization. Whereas marketing and advertising, it's really the brand being able to speak directly and tell its story. We're relying on someone else to tell that story. So we've always had to think about how to package the story in a way that someone else can do that. I think the biggest difference is now we can do more one-to-one communications through public relations. We can tell that brand story through a video. And some of the ways that we tell the stories might be a little bit different than an advertising or marketing approach, but brand storytelling fits right in line with what we've always done, and it's something that public relations professionals are really good at doing, because we've always had to think about the package of the story.
Sure. So at Tunheim, are you guys mainly working on, rather than, like you said, you made a distinction between marketing and PR, and PR being more so like having other people tell the story, or you're feeding kind of that narrative to them, as opposed to marketing being how the company communicates outwards.
Yep.
So is that what you're doing a lot at Tunheim versus like having the brand speak? You're trying to figure out how to get that story out through other channels, through news outlets or other people, things like that?
I'm going to answer with a yes and, because we do all of those things.
Sure.
I think the distinction is, well, one thing that's important also that's happened in the last decade is that we say the silos have fallen. So no longer is there a clear delineation between your public relations, your marketing, and your advertising, because in a lot of ways we've all kind of, our lines have crossed, and social media is really the reason for it. It's why you can do social media through any number of, there are lots of different firms or different places you can go depending on what your purpose is and your goal. But communicating with stakeholders has always been the way that we've tried to look at what we do.
Sure.
And sometimes that is brand storytelling. We are packaging a story, but it's through one of the ways that we try to do that a lot with our clients, and video is one of the most compelling ways to capture this, is through their storytelling. So having the person who's experienced that third-party individual, instead of having them in front of a crowd, we're capturing them on video, and with B-roll, with other forms of video, we can put together a really compelling story that captures and potentially can reach more people than we could if it was in a one-to-one conversation or something that was packaged to hand to just media or elsewhere. But all those stakeholders, including media, are still a very important stakeholder that we're thinking about what they need to tell that story too.
Definitely. I like what you talked about with silos are going away. Mark just had a conversation with another guest, and one of the things they were talking about is just how marketing is becoming a lot more holistic, where you can't just be producing content in isolation, and you have to be working across all the different functions of your team. Otherwise, it's not going to be as effective. And so I really like how you just talked about nothing is siloed anymore.
It's not. And we pride ourselves on working together really well with other partners. And sometimes I think that brings a more compelling lens, because not only are we thinking about how the advertising or marketing should play, but we can also bring that brand storytelling and one-to-one. How is this going to play with the people who need to understand this for you to be successful, so that we can actually elevate each other's work. But it's been something that our business has had to navigate too, and I think anyone in professional in a service industry has had to find what's the right path for them, given the changes that have occurred with social media.
Yeah, so talking about brand storytelling, why should brands be directing and shaping the conversation that's told around their brand, being proactive versus, just letting whatever is being said about them being said? Why is it important for them to shape that and direct it? And then how do you guys go about doing that to them?
It's a great question. And I think one of the most important reasons to shape it is because if you're not someone else, you're leaving a gap for someone else to do that.
Sure.
And on behalf of organizations, one of the times that I think organizations are most frustrated is when someone else has painted the story before they're able to do so. And that happens for all of us. That's human nature. But our CEO, Kathy Tunheim, has this phrase that she uses and that we lean on, which is that we help companies get the reputation they deserve. And the funny thing about that phrase is that sometimes the reputation an organization deserves is actually not a great one, because they've been protective of the information, they've not been authentic or transparent, and so when a situation arises and they feel misunderstood, they maybe are in that place because they didn't proactively think about how they wanted to be understood. So from my perspective and from our firm's perspective, it's really important to step back and often say, what's our strategy? How does this need to be understood by not everyone, but the stakeholders who are really critical for us to be successful at this thing, whether it's a campaign, a initiative, a new strategy, or one that has been a strategy for a long time, but we need to make sure that we're being transparent and clear. And so we try to help navigate that so that those organizations can be proactive, can know who needs to understand it so that they can tell that story directly, and then find the right vehicles and channels to do so. And oftentimes video is a big part of that.
Sure. What type of video are you finding is effective in those situations for shaping the narrative? Is it brand stories? Is it small social media edits or things like that? Or what are you finding effective with
I think it's all of the above.
Sure.
I think we're always testing and learning, but at least in some of our projects that we've incorporated a lot of video, they've all been important. So there's a brand story that's captured, and then we have short edits that are meant for ads or social media views, and we're trying to drive people to come and watch that longer video. I think kind of watching and seeing, not just, I think an important distinction is, don't just create a video for the sake of creating a video, but how do you want it to be seen?
Right.
How do you want it to be found? And are you going to where those people are, which is one of the reasons social media is so compelling. You can target and find those people who are the audiences you're looking to connect with. And if you're not going to where they are, you can't be frustrated if they can't find you,
right.
Because in a lot of ways we have a short attention span today, and we want to see things when we want to see them, where we want to see them, and so a lot of different types of video I think are compelling. And not all video is good for all situations. Sometimes it is good to just create something that you made on your own on your iPhone, and it's something short and sweet because it does what you need it to do. Other times a highly produced video is absolutely the right way to go, and I think there's a lot of ways to test and try and learn with video.
Definitely. I find that interesting because we've done some different social media posts on LinkedIn, and I found that literally just doing a selfie video gets way more engagement sometimes than that same message in this highly produced video that looks really well done. It's just depending on the content and the message. Sometimes people just glaze over that because they just feel like it's not as authentic.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that will be ever changing too. So I'm not surprised to hear that. It probably means it feels more authentic, or it pulls someone in because they know you and they want to hear it, or whatever the reason is.
Right.
But it's a reason to test and try and never feel like you've got it totally figured out.
But you're right, there is still time for that highly polished video, because if you're looking at a company brand story on their website and it's just a shaky selfie video, that's detrimental to the brand versus building it up. Right?
Absolutely.
So you're right. There's purpose in place for all types of content. It's really looking at your audience, what they want, and I think what you said was strategy. Strategy is important, and any content, video especially, and that's what we talk a lot about here at Blue Key. Like, you need to think through that strategy, otherwise you have no foundation to build your video on.
Yep.
And you're just kind of throwing darts at a board.
And hoping that the people who see it are going to be the people who are impacted by it. And yet there's nothing, I mean, any of us watch videos, films, and can be impacted emotionally. But the greatest part about video to me, and what I get excited about, is it can play to 5 emotions. So you can really be pulled in and drawn into a story, and hearing someone talk about their experience in a way that pulls you into it, that's an experience you're creating for a customer. I came out of events marketing prior to, I was a social media director, I managed social media after that, and so I've had some of these experiences, both the live engagements, the online engagements, that have led me to really understand that all of those are an important part of your mix. It's what you're trying to do that helps you to identify what the right ways to communicate and engage are with the stakeholders you're trying to engage.
Yeah, so I find PR interesting because you really are trying to influence the public perception, the conversation, but if you're not measuring that, then how do you know if it's working? So I'm really curious to hear how you guys go about tracking whether or not what you're doing is working, especially with video. How are you tracking if it truly is shaping the conversation to the way you want it to be? Because I think that's a lot of companies have troubles with figuring out if it's working or not.
Yep, and it's a hard thing to do. Yet today it's a lot easier than a decade ago, even. To track and measure. And thanks to social media and many of the metrics and analytics platforms and monitoring platforms that are out there, there are a series of things that we try to do. And it may be anything from message pull through, and we're trying to look in a monitoring service to see, are those messages coming through from third-party evangelists? How many people saw this and your message was intact in that video. It might be looking at views and impressions and reach, but not in a vacuum where they're in and of themselves the important thing, but what do they mean for what we were trying to do? I'd say one of the important things to us as an organization is to identify what we're trying to measure up front, so that the program is designed for the measurements, and then we can actually be set up from the beginning to try to measure toward that and say, how did we do? There's no excuse for having no metrics, because there are a lot of ways to get them. It's just, what are you trying to measure? And then let's see what tools exist and that we have. Many are free, whether it's Facebook Insights to see video views or YouTube Analytics to track how you're doing. If you're getting more followers, if you have more people wanting to follow your content, those are signs that what you're doing is that you're reaching the right people and that it's compelling to them.
Right. Yeah, I like what you said about knowing the metric up front that you're tracking, because you know the saying, marketers say 50% of my marketing's working, and I just don't know which 50%, and that's because you don't know what you're measuring. Yes. You don't know what you're tracking, and so yeah, I think that's great.
You can also have data overload, where you're looking at it and saying, I think this is working.
Right.
And so it is important to know up front, what are we trying to do? Because if you throw stuff at the wall, you can always find metrics that will help you say, well, it worked for something.
Sure.
But if you can measure according to what you're really trying to do. And sometimes you have to start with a baseline. We've had a client that we've worked with and done a lot of video work with over the last 5 years, that every year we do polling and important research that helps us know from the baseline we started 5 years ago, this is really brand storytelling, and we're trying to make an impact in perception, which is not something that can happen with one video. It's a long investment. It takes continued conversations. It's about building trust. So you're being transparent and sharing your story. You got to reach the right people who need to trust you so that they can come along that journey. But every year we do polling and focus groups to say, okay, where are we in meeting this mark year over year? And over time, you can see how you've moved that baseline. That's compelling ways to look at whether you're moving a message. And then if it's public affairs or something where there's something that we're advocating for, if it's something that's going to be voted on at the legislature, how the results turn out can tell you how well you did. It also, you need to know where you're starting. Are you trying to push a big rock up a hill because public perception is in a place that it's probably going to stay there, or is there a movable place? And you need to understand that at the beginning versus thinking that one video, one campaign is going to have the ability to make a lot of change. It can, but it depends on what it is, and again, know what you're trying to do.
100%. And you're so right. A lot of people just think like video can be a magic bullet, and if I just create this one video, it's going to solve all my problems. And a lot of times when we're talking to people, we're talking about you need to create a video strategy that looks at how video is incorporating into your entire marketing plan, your entire communication strategy, and then also thinking about other videos down the line, because sometimes you can have a really great result if you just create a series of videos versus just one video, but you're missing the follow-up, or you're missing them at other parts of that journey that they're going through with your brand. So I think that's really good.
And sometimes video isn't the right means for something, but could you capture what that was and then find a way to repurpose it? In a lot of ways, video is so malleable, and you can use it in many ways, and it's an important tool to be able to think about. And for us, it's got some role in almost everything that we do, but the scale and ability to utilize it depends on what we're trying to do, and also if the organization is able to invest in all of those pieces.
Right, yeah, I mean, with just this one segment alone, we get a full, 30, 40-minute conversation that we can post on YouTube, and then we get like 6 social media edits that we can share, and then we can get a transcript of the whole conversation, and that's a blog form, and then we can turn it into a podcast. So 100% right, it's just so versatile.
Yes, and having someone who can edit it for you and post-produce it so you can use it is a really important part too, because I know I often get asked when I'm speaking to groups and video comes up, what are some tools that I can use that help me to do this myself, because video feels like something that I can't invest in. And I often try to say, well, why don't you try a few things to make a case for the investment? There are lots of tools out there. Adobe offers a way to use its solution. You just need to download that, and you can try some things. Talk to professionals about what's a starter that I could do, and find some ways to test and try. But trying to make a case to go from no video to a whole series of polished videos might be a hard investment to sell through to a senior leadership team that hasn't seen the benefit of it yet. Although there's lots of good data out there if you Google it to find compelling data. But I think doing a few tests, bringing back data that you can say, look, we were able to do these things, or we maximized this speech because we were able to capture it, and then we shared it, and we reached so many more of our stakeholders, whatever those potential uses are, there's always a way to run some tests to try to see how it can work for your organization. But I think video can work for every organization. If you're a B2B company and you know exactly who you're trying to communicate with, there's a great way to capture something and share with them, just like if you're a huge consumer brand that needs to engage and have fun with your customers, there's something there for everyone.
Yeah, did you hear that, guys? Videos for everyone. She said it, heard it first.
It is. Every time we're on social media, where do you stop? You're scrolling through on Facebook, it's the videos.
Right.
Even if you're not hearing it, you can read what it says or the visuals pull you in.
Right.
There's a compelling use.
Right. So you mentioned about having somebody a client you'd worked with for 5 years, and you were able to kind of see the impact of your communications, your PR strategies. I'm really curious if you have some cool success stories that you can share, either broadly about or specifically, where video has been a core component in what you've seen from that.
Yeah, well, using that example, that particular client is the work that we're doing for them is somewhat about advocacy, somewhat about storytelling, and helping them be better understood. And so with that, they operate in the healthcare sphere, and what we've been able to do with them is take some really complicated stories that are challenging and don't really resonate or create empathy if you're just hearing them in a way that doesn't relate to individual stories, but actually take those individuals and have them tell their story, and then weave in the organization's story from their perspective in a way that makes it feel more real. It creates either empathy or at least a level of understanding that wouldn't be there otherwise, and it tells a more compelling story than just reading on a sheet of paper what this organization was able to do. So we've found a lot of success, especially through trying to tell complicated stories and having the ability beforehand to say, what are we trying to do with this, and really map it out so that the story comes together in a way that is compelling on behalf of the brand and meets the long-term objectives.
Are you able to share any tangible results, we saw an increase of whatever percentage in positive conversation about it, or are you able to share any of that?
Yeah, I wish I could speak to the one client that we were talking about, and I don't actually know those numbers, but I know that they've been a positive change. With respect to some other campaigns that we've done with video, I can say that we've seen the engagement that we want to see by setting at the beginning, who are we trying to talk to and what stakeholders are we trying to reach, then utilizing the digital tools that we have or the tools that the organization is able to give us access to, whether it's list building or lists that they've already built of their stakeholders, or particular channels that they have to try to reach those stakeholders. We've been able to, with those digital tools and analytics, show the engagement that we were looking to see and continue to track over time.
Cool, awesome. Well, is there any other tips that you want to share with the viewers about people, if they want to get started with incorporating video into their communications and their PR efforts? Where's a good place to start, and how should people start getting introduced to video?
Well, I said it a bit earlier, but I do think that it would be a great thing to just start by looking at what you're trying to do. Who are your stakeholders that are really important to communicate with? And are there some things where you're feeling misunderstood or not understood? And where there's a potential to impact it. Not every gnarly communication is a need is going to be able to be addressed, but many can, and some of those are going to be best addressed through video. So start by laying out your situation and understanding where those things are at and what things are movable, especially in terms of behavior changes or changing perception, that you could utilize video as a channel for yourself, or as a tool, and using the channels that you have to reach those stakeholders to try to impact that story. And like I said before, start small. Don't try to start with something huge. Test some things, make a case for it, and see where video can be an important part of your media mix.
Awesome, cool. Well, thanks so much, Liz, for joining us.
It's so fun.
Yeah, this has been awesome. And until next time, let us know in the comments what you guys want to hear about, what you found useful. But otherwise, we'll see you on the next episode.